Endings can be both a bummer and extraordinarily cathartic. In the case of role-playing games, the end to a campaign, a one-shot, or game can come in so many ways. Was it an abrupt end due to real life? Or was it an end simply because the GM and players are ready to move on? How do we deal with TTRPG campaigns ending? What might be the feelings that come from this experience? And how do we, as both players and GMs, deal with that? Thus, today I'm going to be unpacking these questions. When should you end your TTRPG game or campaign? What are some things to look out for? And finally, how do we deal with the loss of a game? So to start, why you should or should not end your campaign or game. So the question of why to end your campaign is an important one and a difficult one. Those reasons can be diverse. Maybe the game has dragged on for too long. Maybe your fellow players have changed and you want to play with different people. Maybe you're just feeling burnt out and want some sort of closure for your TTRPG session. Maybe you as a player are ready to finally conclude the game. The end game feels closer than ever before, and you think you're ready for that closure. All of those reasons are valid, whether you're the player or the GM. Knowing the reason why will be helpful in discussing and communicating the how. And of course, if you aren't ready for the campaign to end, that's also okay. Think about your whys and think about your why nots on ending the campaign. And then proceed to talk to the players and the GM. And there are two ways to end your games, either planned or unplanned. We're going to start off with talking about ending as planned. This is where you and the others work on ending the game over the coming sessions, together. And there are no right ways to answer this, but I've tried to follow this method when asked. If your game did not have an ending in mind, discuss what that would look like for the player and GM. First, this is largely dependent on the existing plot threads in a game. For instance, if your game contains several plot threads such as forbidden necromancy, the group is looking for, say, a particular NPC. They're uncovering a rip in space and time, and they're taking care of an evil dragon. Also, they're raising the proletariat class in their world to be the ruling forces of their specific nation. That is a lot of plot threads. No player or GM can reasonably combine all of them in a singular ending. So, pick just one, or pick a couple. Pick a thread that everyone is cool with as a player and the game master. And for the other threads, leave them hanging. Even if it is a heroic fantasy or otherwise, your characters are only capable of so much within a given time, especially in the confines of the real world. Plus, those threads can lead to other stories for new characters. You can also, thirdly, combine threads. So advice for the GM, look for common connections between all the threads. Maybe the reason your group is looking for this NPC is because that person has technology needed to defeat the evil dragon who indeed ripped a hole in space and time. See what I did there? I was able to tie 3 of those plot threads together semi-seamlessly. And if you are struggling GMs, it's okay for everyone to just choose one plot thread and go with that. Players, if you are at the end of your campaign, then as characters, go to that goal. Don't get too distracted by other objectives. Just make sure you are pushing to resolve the plot thread or plot threads that everyone has agreed to. And for both GMs and players, when that epic finale comes and the heart-stopping moments are happening, give the epilogue you deserve. GMs, give the players 5, 10, or 15 minutes to have that one final short scene. Maybe this is a scene a year later or far after the characters have passed. Let the characters have that scene and do with it as they see fit. Players, revel in that time. Maybe even include other players in this epic moment. Work with other players to create something fun, terrifying, or even joyous. Whatever it is, do it together. And be sure not to hog too much of the spotlight. But as you already know, that isn't the only way to end a campaign or a game. It likely will be abruptly. And the reasons are numerous. It could be because of scheduling. Maybe someone like the GM or a group of players in the game leave due to personal and or life complications. Maybe it's a fight between players or the game master. Or maybe a player or GM passes away or leaves the city or the place you live for good. Not all games you run or play will end on a high note. Sometimes it's somber, and oftentimes it's just life throwing a curveball in your plans. These ends are not so graceful, but I think are much more likely to happen with how hectic our lives are, and the several things that make our lives busy in this hellscape that is capitalism. So, first off, what do? Well, you can try to salvage your group. The biggest reason I think a group ends, like I said, is because of life. So in these abrupt endings, the best way I think to deal with this is to salvage the group by finding the remaining players in the GM and creating a group from that. If someone leaves the group, or if a couple people leave the group, sometimes it's better to cut your losses and continue without that person, and or find someone else to play with. Another thing you could do is having one last hurrah. If there is an abrupt ending, try to find time with the remaining players and their GM to scratch out some semblance of an ending, even if it's rushed. Even if that player or that game master is missing, there isn't technically any reason you and the others can't make up something that resolves the game. And this last one might be the most sad of them all, but sometimes you just have to accept the loss and enjoy the memories. Friends disappear, lovers pass, shit happens. And all of those feelings you're feeling are entirely valid and entirely understood. They suck. And they don't feel good. I know, I understand, I've been there, as both a professional GM and as someone who runs games as a hobby. All of those fun and enjoyable memories are gone in a sudden because someone you care about just leaves. And the one thing I tell you, whoever you are, you have to hold those memories close. Write them down, record them if you can, make memes, whatever you do, process them with someone. If those moments brought you joy and you weren't hurting anyone, why not share them with those you hold dear? Loss and closure are inevitable. To live is to one day die. To begin is to one day have something come to an end, even if abrupt. But that doesn't mean it would always be bitter or even be good. No matter how your game or campaign ends, you had a fun and enjoyable experience learning about yourself, playing the game, and just expressing yourself. And if you didn't, well, you learned something at the very least, and you know what you don't like in a game. Ironically enough, there was one quote on Reddit as I was researching this topic that came to mind. Remember the best parts and how it all began. It's the journey that makes these feelings so wonderful. Every character mirroring a piece of your soul. Those moments at the table are awesome and beautiful. No matter what they were, no matter the learning experience, I think there's something to be said about starting, even if you don't know the end. Try to end with grace, but if life calls, recognize its call and process those feelings. And if you are looking to introduce new players into TTRPGs for the end of your current campaign, well, surprisingly, I got an amazing video on how to introduce new players to tabletop role-playing games over here. And if you want to support my creation and my content, feel free to check out my Patreon. There, you can subscribe to several different tiers and support this lovely channel financially. If not, you can also check out my Ko-fi as well as my Twitter and other social media down below in the description box. And as always, I'm your average everyday queer host, Blurty Disposition. I hope you all have an awesome day. Ciao.